What you've just heard is actually not the beginning of Beethoven's violin concerto, although a great many works of the classic period, concertos, symphonies, do begin this way, with full orchestra, tutti, forte, announcing a theme boldly. But the passage that you've just heard actually occurs 365 bars and fully 5 minutes after the beginning of the piece. Instead of full orchestra, the first sounds we hear in the concerto are on the kettle drums alone. 5 taps on the timpani. Now, symphonies have begun with drum rolls, but there's nothing like this anywhere up to this moment. And then there comes, only 2 or 3 bars later, 5 more taps with an upbeat before. And a few bars later than that, the first violins Now, those of you who've played Mr. Oistrach's recording, and I always believe that the listener ought to hear the whole work before he starts to analyze it and look at the details of the work. I say those of you who have played the whole work will realize that between the two examples we've just heard, there is actually the first theme, the important first theme of this piece in the wind band, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, and the timpani. In that setting, these 5 notes, rat, dat, 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 dam, are so inconspicuous, but they're like a minor character in a novel whose ultimate importance we don't dream of in the first appearance, and who takes on a new significance each time he appears. Now here are the 5 notes again. You see, it's quiet, but it's still square-toed and on the beat and definite. Rat, dat, 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 dam. And still later, horns and trumpets and timpani. Now, let's go way back to the very beginning and take the orchestral ritornello as it comes, starting with these 5 taps on the timpani, and then a beautiful passage, serene, quiet, in D major for the woodwinds. It's 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, and 2 bassoons. Now the strings. Second violins and violas, and then cellos and basses. And the quiet ending to this span of music, and a new idea. Up, up, bum. Up, up, bum. Then, suddenly, ta-ta-ta-ta-dum, 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 ta-ta-ta-ta-dum. Then. Horns and trumpets and timpani and the strings in D minor. Notice those inner parts. Again, the 4 notes. Dot, 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 dot. and we've stopped at just the end of the orchestral ritornello. Now, the traditional thing with the classic concerto was to begin with an orchestral ritornello or an exposition of the musical ideas in the orchestra alone without the soloist. Our solo violin has not yet entered. And we get in this ritornello an extraordinary example of one of the tendencies of Beethoven's maturity, a tendency toward leisurely, expansive, easygoing exposition of musical ideas. This violin concerto comes from the year 1806, and there's hardly in Beethoven's whole life any equal to that year in fertility. That's the year of the Appassionata Sonata, the great F minor sonata, the three-string quartets, opus 59, the Fourth Symphony, even sketches for the Fifth Symphony, and the first revision of Fidelio in preparation for the second production of the opera Fidelio, and the Coriolanus Overture. What a year! And in that year, you get the two opposing tendencies. On the one side, toward the terse, dramatic, tragic piece like the Appassionata, the sketches for the first movement of the Fifth Symphony, so concise, short. And on the other hand, this leisurely, expansive, serene, and relaxed music. Now, we've had in this ritornello actually three main themes. The first one for the woodwind, and the second theme is so like the first that one hardly recognizes it as a new musical idea. Here's none of the sharp contrast between masculine first theme and feminine second theme that the books talk about a great deal. Here is a second theme that's just as serene as the first. And the third theme, actually the closing theme, amazing that three themes should be brought together in this ritornello with such similarity one to the other. Now we're going to pick up the very end of the orchestral ritornello, which is, by the way, the historic name given to the opening span of the first movement of a concerto. And you'll see that it doesn't end as I played it on the piano, but just before my final chord, the soloist makes his entrance. And this is, as a matter of fact, one of the most beautiful first appearances to be found in the whole literature of the concerto. With these big chords, the ritornello ends, and listen. There you have the end of the orchestral ritornello and the beginning of the second exposition of all the themes we've already had. And in this second exposition, the solo violin is the chief protagonist. And what resources the soloist has, soaring an octave above the orchestra with this first theme, and then embellishing it and decorating the theme with garlands of music. The appearance of the second theme in this exposition is a remarkable spot. The tracery in the solo violin thins out to a trill, and then the second theme comes in the clarinets and the bassoons in the orchestra for the first phrase, and then the balancing phrase appears in the solo violin, which soars aloft once again to its very highest register. Then, as you'll find from your recording, after we hear the third theme, the closing theme, now appearing in the exposition of the piece, previously heard in the ritornello, then the violin ends with a trill which, had this been Mozart, would have led straight into an orchestral tutti. But listen what happens here in Beethoven. Here's one of the mysterious touches of this first movement. Listen, listen. Did you hear the low F natural in the cellos and basses? The first violins play, and then the cellos and double basses. This surprising incident, which presents the original 5 drum taps in still another guise, is followed by brilliant scale passages in the solo violin, marking the end of the exposition. And then we are plunged directly into the great middle span of the movement, the so-called development. This central span is ushered in by the orchestra alone, repeating in Beethoven's expansive way a whole section of the original orchestral ritornello. But there's another surprising event just after the re-entrance of the solo violin, involving once more the mysterious figure of the 5 soft taps. Again, not drums, but cellos and basses. Listen to this. Listen, listen. What an incident that is. The violin climbing way up to the high F, then the cellos and basses entering on a low G, and so on. These surprises at every turn in this piece. Now, midway in this development, there is the appearance of something really new, a cavatina, bel canto melody for the solo violin, and in G minor. This is the only pathetic passage, it seems to me, in this whole first movement. G minor going over to E flat major, and remember the G minor for Mozart and for so much else in Beethoven is a pathetic key. Now we're within a very few seconds of the end of the great middle span, the development, and the passage from the development section of a classical work to its recapitulation is one of the great bridgeheads where you pass over from one territory, the territory of the middle or development section, to the territory of the recapitulation. It's always interesting to see how any composer does that. Now listen to Beethoven as he goes from the end of the development to the beginning of the recapitulation. Staccato, pizzicato in the strings, and then in that orchestral tutti, you see, we're swept into the beginning of the recapitulation. Now it remains only in this first movement to play the end of the cadenza and the coda, the final half minute of the piece. Violin solo with only pizzicatos in the strings. Now listen. And then the cadence twice as slow, but then the closing theme, bassoon. The bassoon, the bassoon. One of the great joys which comes from repeated listening to a recording is the increasing awareness of the architecture, the grand plan of the music. Music is sound in motion, in time. Music is not static, it is always going forward. Its structure or form is a series of spans, not rectangular blocks like the ground plan of a cathedral, but spans or arches of sound moving forward in time. The first movement of a concerto has one of the most beautiful grand plans, simple and majestic, yet more extensive than the symphony, quartet, or sonata. Its opening span is the ritornello, in which a number of the main musical ideas are revealed in the orchestra alone. And then comes the second span, the exposition, in which the soloist and the orchestra share equally in a second presentation of the musical ideas. And then the development or middle span, which in the Beethoven Violin Concerto begins, as you observed, with a repetition of a large chunk of the opening ritornello, then the recapitulation, then the cadenza, which was not written down by Beethoven, but in the old days was improvised by the soloist, and finally the coda. 6 great spans in all: ritornello, exposition, development, recapitulation, cadenza, and coda. Repeated listening gives you the opportunity of feeling and responding to the logic of this design, and of observing especially those dramatic and beautiful spots where the great spans of music are joined together, and we are swept on from the end of each span through the points of articulation of the spans into a new territory. Now, the structure of the slow movement is much simpler. The slow movement is a set of variations on a theme with the interpolation of a second theme between variations 3 and 4, and again after variation 4. The finale is a rondo, a grand design different from that of the first movement. Here, the symmetrical spans of music are most easily identified by the successive letters A, B, A, C, A, B, A, except that in Beethoven's violin concerto, the last A is replaced by the solo cadenza and the long coda or epilogue based on A. The second movement is the slow movement. It's a larghetto. The orchestra is a little different. There are no trumpets, and there are no timpani, and there are no oboes, but most surprising of all, no flutes. We have only the 2 clarinets, the 2 bassoons, and the 2 horns with the strings. And the strings start off with mutes very, very softly. Notice the silences. And what an amazing turn of harmony at the end of this first phrase. Going to back up again and go over that and then press on from that point. Now listen. Silence. And then an extra flow of melody. Two horns. And the clarinet and the solo violin. You see, discourse, what really sounds like a discourse by the principal violin, the solo violin. And what we really have here, though it's so beautifully disguised by the naturalness of everything, what we really have is a theme and variations. I think the theme and variations quality comes out most clearly if you listen to the orchestra alone. I'm going to play the beginning of the first variation. Two horns, and then the clarinet. The clarinet and the strings. And in the full setting, of course, the violin has been playing way above, and just at the point where we have stopped, there is a cadenza for the violin, a trill. All the music is interrupted. Flow of the music ceases for the violin to play his cadenza. Now, the second variation, again leaving out the solo violin, the second variation features the bassoon in the orchestra. And the third variation, again without the solo violin, picking up the third variation with the orchestra, strings, forte, and the two clarinets, the two bassoons, and the two horns, the whole wind band as it appears in this movement, forte. Then Beethoven breaks into this regular succession of variations of a theme and inserts a new theme. Now, when you come after the interpolation of a new theme for the solo violin, when you come to the fourth variation, I ask you to notice especially the sound of strings pizzicato. And we'll have the solo violin here as well as the orchestra. At the end of the slow movement, Beethoven interrupts the delicate design of tracery for the solo violin, first by the two horns with mutes very softly, and then the first and second violins still more softly, and then a sudden outburst for all the strings without their mutes, fortissimo, and then a cadenza, as you remember from the Oistrach recording, a cadenza for the solo violin which ties together the slow movement and the finale. Then after the violin cadenza, we are led right straight into the rondo, and it begins with the solo violin with the faintest accompaniment from the cellos. Get that rhythm. Then Beethoven says, delicately, delicately. And then with the full orchestra, bum, 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 bum. There, one of the most wonderful effects of orchestration, the solo violin at the great height again, and against it two horns. Now we're going to start just there and play the orchestra parts without the solo violin, starting with the two horns. Then you'll see the figures are picked up by oboe and clarinet, then the two bassoons with strings, and this is a wonderful opportunity, one of the many, many opportunities in this Beethoven violin concerto, to study the sonority of the different orchestral instruments, especially of the wind choir as opposed to the string choir. Now, oboe and clarinet. Bassoon. Strings. Oboes and clarinets. Strings. Now, we're going to back up once more to the conclusion of the first theme and add the solo violin in now to the transaction. What a marvelous, marvelous tossing of the ball back and forth between the full orchestra and the solo violin. Now, what you've just heard was the opening of the second main theme of this last movement. Now, you'll recall that the first movement had an episode in the middle of it in G minor, the only pathetic spot in the first movement. Here, curiously enough, in the final rondo is also an episode in G minor. It begins with the solo violin. Listen. And a moment later, the bassoon, first bassoon, carries on this melody that we've just heard in the solo violin. And the solo violin weaves around it an embroidery way up at 2-3 octaves above. One more episode is worth noticing before we come to the very end. That is a passage parallel to the first appearance of the two horns that we played just a few moments ago. Heavy chords in the orchestra, then pum, pum, pum. And the solo violin takes over that figure with two notes pizzicato before leaping up to the top of its register with the entrance of the two horns. It's curious, considering Beethoven's exploitation of all the possible devices of showmanship on the violin, that this is the only spot in the entire concerto where the solo violin plays pizzicato. Then, and a few moments after that, there's a big cadenza for the solo violin, a cadenza ending in a trill, and then one of the most amazing spots. Cellos and basses come in with the figure which we're so well acquainted with by this time. And then again, forte, and then diminuendo, and then a most amazing modulation, veering off to one of the most distant keys. And again, diminuendo. Listen. Listen. there. Now we've come to a point within a half a minute of the end of this finale of Beethoven's concerto, and here in these last 30 seconds we get one of the most interesting and exciting examples of the essential fact about all concertos, and that is the opposition of the full force of the orchestra against the power of a single soloist to assert himself through his virtuosity, through the beauty and the attractiveness and the showmanship of what he does. This has always been true of all concertos from the earliest times. It's the contrast between omnes, the all, on one side, and solus, the individual, on the other side. And here, Beethoven, in the most wonderful way, throws the whole orchestra against the soloist and the soloist against the whole orchestra. And as Sir Donald Tovey has said, the orchestral fortissimos are silenced by the violin soloist. This is a beautiful example of the balance between the mighty force of the full orchestra and the virtuosity of the single violin. And just before the end, the whole business quiets down to almost nothing, pianissimo in the orchestra and pianissimo even in the solo violin, up to the last moment. And the orchestra. Da 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 da. And diminuendo, diminuendo. Listen.